Chapter 4 and 5 of Book 5 of Les Misérables, Volume 5, by Victor Hugo. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Roseanne Schmidt. Les Misérables, Volume 5, by Victor Hugo. Translated by Isabel, Florence, HAPGOOD. Book 5, Grandson and Grandfather. Chapters 4 and 5. Chapter 4. Mademoiselle Gillenormand ends by no longer thinking it a bad thing that Monsieur Fauchelevent should have entered with something under his arm. Cosette and Marius held each other once more. What that interview was like we decline to say. There are things which one must not attempt to depict. The son is one of them. The entire family, including Basque and Nicolette, were assembled in Marius' chamber at the moment when Cosette entered it. Precisely at that moment, the grandfather was on the point of blowing his nose. He stopped short, holding his nose in his handkerchief, and gazing over it at Cosette. She appeared on the threshold. It seemed to him that she was surrounded by a glory. "Adorable!" he exclaimed. Then he blew his nose noisily. Cosette was intoxicated, delighted, frightened, in heaven. She was as thoroughly alarmed as anyone can be by happiness. She stammered, all pale, yet flushed. She wanted to fling herself into Marius' arms, and dared not. Ashamed of loving in the presence of all these people. People are pitiless towards happy lovers. They remain when the latter most desire to be left alone. Lovers have no need of any people whatever. With Cosette, and behind her, there had entered a man with white hair, who was grave, yet smiling, though with a vague and heart-rending smile. It was Monsieur Fauchelevent. It was Jean Valjean. He was very well dressed, as the porter had said, entirely in black, in perfectly new garments, and with a white cravat. The porter was 1,000 leagues from recognizing in this correct bourgeois, in this probable notary, the fear-inspiring bearer of the corpse, who had sprung up at his door on the night of the 7th of June, tattered, muddy, hideous, haggard, his face masked in blood and mire, supporting in his arms the fainting Marius. Still, his porter's scent was aroused. When Monsieur Fauchelevent arrived with Cosette, the porter had not been able to refrain from communicating to his wife this aside: "I don't know why it is, but I can't help fancying that I've seen that face before." Monsieur Fauchelevent, in Marius' chamber, remained apart near the door. He had under his arm a package which bore considerable resemblance to an octavo volume enveloped in paper. The envelope in paper was of a greenish hue, and appeared to be mouldy. "Does the gentleman always have books like that under his arm?" Mademoiselle Gillenormand, who did not like books, demanded in a low tone of Nicolette. "Well," retorted Mademoiselle Gillenormand, who had overheard her in the same tone, "he's a learned man." "What then? Is that his fault?" "Monsieur Boulaire, one of my acquaintances, never walked out without a book under his arm either, and he always had some old volume hugged to his heart like that." And with a bow, he said aloud, "Monsieur Fauchelevent." Father Gillenormand did not do it intentionally, but inattention to proper names was an aristocratic habit of his. "Monsieur Fauchelevent, I have the honor of asking you, on behalf of my grandson, Baron Marius Pontmercy, for the hand of Mademoiselle." Monsieur Fauchelevent bowed. "That's settled," said the grandfather, and turning to Marius and Cosette, with both arms extended in blessing, he cried, "Permission to adore each other." They did not require him to repeat it twice. So much the worse. The chirping began. They talked low, Marius resting on his elbow on his reclining chair, Cosette standing beside him. "Oh, heavens!" murmured Cosette. "I see you once again. It is thou! It is you! The idea of going and fighting like that! But why? It is horrible. I had been dead for 4 months. Oh, how wicked it was of you to go to that battle! What had I done to you? I pardon you, but you will never do it again. A little while ago, when they came to tell us to come to you, I still thought that I was about to die, but it was from joy. I was so sad I have not taken the time to dress myself. I must frighten people with my looks. What will your relatives say to see me in a crumpled collar? Do speak. You let me do all the talking. We are still in the Rue de l'Homme Armé. It seems that your shoulder was terrible. They told me that you could put your fist in it, and then it seems that they cut your flesh with the scissors. That is frightful. I have cried till I have no eyes left. It is queer that a person can suffer like that. Your grandfather has a very kind air. Don't disturb yourself. Don't rise on your elbow. You will injure yourself. Oh, how happy I am. So our unhappiness is over. I am quite foolish. I had things to say to you, and I no longer know in the least what they were. Do you still love me? We live in the Rue de la Homme. There is no garden. I made lint all the time. Stay, sir. Look, it is your fault. I have a callus on my finger. Angel, said Marius. Angel is the only word in the language that cannot be worn out. No other word could resist the merciless use which lovers make of it. Then, as they were spectators, they paused, and said not a word more, contenting themselves with softly touching each other's hands. Monsieur Gillenormand turned towards those who were in the room and cried, "Talk loud, the rest of you! Make a noise, you people behind the scenes! Come a little uproar, the deuce, so that the children can chatter at their ease." And approaching Marius and Cosette, he said to them in a very low voice, "Call each other thou, don't stand on ceremony." Aunt Gillenormand looked on in astonishment at this irruption of light in her elderly household. There was nothing aggressive about this amazement. It was not the least in the world like the scandalized and envious glance of an owl at two turtle doves. It was the stupid eye of a poor innocent 70 and 50 years of age. It was a life which had been a failure gazing at that triumph, love. "Mademoiselle Gillenormand, Seigneur," said her father to her, "I told you that this is what would happen to you." He remained silent for a moment and then added, "Look at the happiness of others." Then he turned to Cosette. "How pretty she is! How pretty she is! She's a Greuze. So you are going to have that all to yourself, you scamp! Ah, my rogue, you are getting off nicely with me. You are happy. If I were not 15 years too old, we would fight with swords to see which of us should have her. Come now, I am in love with you, mademoiselle. It's perfectly simple. It is your right. You are in the right. Ah, what a sweet, charming little wedding this would make. Our parish is Saint-Denis-sous-Saint-Sacrament. But I will get a dispensation so that you can be married at St. Paul. The church is better. It was built by the Jesuits. It is more coquettish. It is opposite the fountain of Cardinal de Baraque. The masterpiece of Jesuit architecture is at Namur. It is called Saint Loup. You must go there after you are married. It is worth the journey. Mademoiselle, I am quite of your mind. I think girls ought to marry. That is what they are made for. There is a certain Sainte Catherine, whom I should always like to see uncoiffed. It's a fine thing to remain a spinster, but it is chilly. The Bible says, multiply. In order to save the people, Jeanne d'Arc is needed. But in order to make people, what is needed is Mother Goose. So marry, my beauties. I really do not see the use in remaining a spinster. I know that they have their chapel apart in the church, and that they fall back on the Society of the Virgin. But, sapristi, a handsome husband, a fine fellow, and at the expiration of a year, a big blonde brat who nurses lustily, and who has fine rolls of fat on his thighs, and who musses up your breast in handfuls with his little rosy paws, laughing the while like the dawn. That's better than holding a candle at vespers, and chanting Tauris et Borne. The grandfather executed a pirouette on his 80-year-old heels, and began to talk again like a spring that has broken loose once more. Ainsi bornant les cours de très rêvasserie, alcip il est donc vrai, dans plutôt te marie. By the way, what is it, father? Have not you an intimate friend? Yes, Courfeyrac. What has become of him? He is dead. That is good. He seated himself near them, made Cosette sit down, and took their 4 hands in his aged and wrinkled hands. She is exquisite, this darling. She is a masterpiece, this Cosette. She is a very young girl, and a very great lady. She will only be a baroness, which is a come-down for her. She was born a marquise. What eyelashes she has! Get it well fixed in your noodles, my children, that you are in the true road. Love each other. Be foolish about it. Love is the folly of men and the wit of God. Adore each other. Only, he added suddenly, becoming gloom, what a misfortune! It has just occurred to me. More than half of what I possess is swallowed up in an annuity. So long as I live, it will not matter, but after my death, a score of years hence, ah, my poor children, you will not have a sou. Your beautiful white hands, Madame la Baronne, will do the devil the honor of pulling him by the tail." At this point they heard a grave and tranquil voice say, "Mademoiselle Euphrasie Fauchelevent possesses 600,000 francs." It was the voice of Jean Valjean. So far he had not uttered a single word, no one seemed to be aware that he was there, and he had remained standing erect and motionless behind all these happy people. "What has Mademoiselle Euphrasie to do with the question?" inquired the startled grandfather. "I am she," replied Cosette. 600,000 francs?" resumed Monsieur Gillenormand. "Minus 14 or 15,000 francs, possibly," said Jean Valjean, and he laid on the table the package which Mademoiselle Gillenormand had mistaken for a book. Jean Valjean himself opened the package. It was a bundle of bank notes. They were turned over and counted. There were 500 notes for 1,000 francs each, and 168 of 500. In all, 584,000 francs. "This is a fine book," said Monsieur Gillenormand. 584,000 francs, murmured the aunt. "This arranges things well, does it not, Mademoiselle Gillenormand, Seigneur?" said the grandfather. "That devil of a Marius has ferreted out the nest of a millionaire grisette in his tree of dreams. Just trust to the love affairs of young folks, now, will you? Students find studentesses with 600,000 francs. Cherubino works better than Rothschild." 584,000 francs, repeated Mademoiselle Gillenormand in a low tone. 584! One might as well say 600,000. As for Marius and Cosette, they were gazing at each other while this was going on. They hardly heeded this detail. Chapter 5. Deposit your money in a forest rather than with a notary. The reader has no doubt understood without necessitating a lengthy explanation that Jean Valjean, after the Champmathieu affair, had been able, thanks to his first escape of a few days' duration, to come to Paris and to withdraw in season from the hands of Laffitte the sum earned by him under the name of Monsieur Madeleine at M. and that fearing that he might be recaptured, which eventually happened, he had buried and hidden that sum in the forest of Montfermeil, in the locality known as the Blaru Bottom. The sum 630,000 francs, all in blank bills, was not very bulky, and was contained in a box, only in order to preserve the box from dampness. He had placed it in a coffer filled with chestnut shavings. In the same coffer he had placed his other treasures, the bishop's candlesticks. It will be remembered that he had carried off the candlesticks when he made his escape from M. The man seen one evening for the first time by Boulatruelle was Jean Valjean. Later on, every time that Jean Valjean needed money, he went to get it in the Blaru Bottom. Hence the absences which we have mentioned. He had a pickaxe somewhere in the heather, in a hiding place known to himself alone. When he beheld Marius convalescent, feeling that the hour was at hand when that money might prove of service, he had gone to get it. It was he again, whom Boulatruelle had seen in the woods. But on this occasion, in the morning instead of the evening, Boulatruelle inherited his pickaxe. The actual sum was 584,500 francs. Jean Valjean withdrew the 500 francs for himself. We shall see hereafter, he thought. The difference between that sum and the 630,000 francs withdrew from Laffitte represented his expenditure in 10 years, from 1823 to 1833. The 5 years of his stay in the convent had cost only 5,000 francs. Jean Valjean set the 2 candlesticks on the chimney-piece, where they glittered to the great admiration of Toussaint. Moreover, Jean Valjean knew that he was delivered from Javert. The story had been told in his presence, and he had verified the fact in the Moniteur, how a police inspector named Javert had been found drowned under a boat belonging to some laundresses, between the Pont au Change and the Pont Neuf, and that a writing left by this man, otherwise irreproachable, and highly esteemed by his superiors, pointed to a fit of mental aberration and a suicide. In fact, thought Jean Valjean, since he left me at liberty, once having got me in his power, he must have been already mad. End of chapter 4 and 5. Recording by Roseanne Schmidt.